Imperial Star Destroyers, if designed by 1938 navies. Now, here's the thing. If you've seen this video already before, or you've seen a version of this video already before, I'm going to apologize now. Well, I'm not, but I am. Because some people got the video and it was alive, and they seem to be shocked by the level of interaction I have with the chat. There were quite a few comments of, you didn't get into the video immediately. No, because it's live and I usually talk to the chat first. There's always people who message me going, I'm going to be a couple minutes and those sort of things, and I try and have a slow start to lives because it allows people to join in who are trying to get there. With recorded videos, I tend to get straight into them. So that's what I'm going to do. But my point is, I will start having a thing at the beginning of lives going, this is a live. If you don't like this bit, wait for the recorded video to come out, or skip 20 minutes into the video. That's it. Anyway, so. Imperial Star Destroyers, if designed by 1938 navies. Oh my lord, was this fun. This was really fun. Mostly it turned out as fun because of two things. From a historical perspective, it made me really start to examine and think about what the navies really wanted. So before you can sort of apply what the Navy's going to want for its Star Destroyer, you have to first think about the Navy of what does it really want to build in this period? What's it really building and interested in it? What's it really got going on? What is the true representation of that Navy? Is it necessarily a new build, or is it the modernized vessel? And that's a tough one at certain points to figure through. Then on top of that, you have the fact that, as I explained in live, well, the rate of historian pay is not what it used to be. I got, for my royalties check for the book, which I'll be talking about in a second, my book, for 3 months, £174. So, I cannot afford to hire an artist to turn this into my vision. And my CAD skills, they're not quite that level. And believe it or not, I did try on Galactic Civilizations 4 to create it, and honestly, they don't have a model like a Star Destroyer like they did a long time ago. It used to be you could build a fairly convincing Galaxy class, a fairly convincing Voyager, and a pretty decent looking Star Destroyer if you wanted from the components. I'm sure none of that was designed to be that way, but you could. You now can't on the latest one, which is annoying because that's the best one to get pictures of. So I turned to AI. And that's why this video has got the AI fun technique. Because I've had to, first off, I tried to program AI with my instructions. And they produce things like this. Which is, I suppose, is in a way Venator class combined with HMS Warspite, but not combined in the way I wanted it combined. I do not think that's a practical vessel, but it is a gorgeous looking thing. Let's be honest. If somehow you could make that work as a viable warship, oh my lord, does it look scary. That thing turning up is just, we're here. How do you want to meet your end? You don't want to? Good. Have peace. Let me go home and get on with, I don't know, eating bolts, chewing on I-beams, or, you know, stuff like that. But no, that wasn't what I wanted. So then I went to AI itself because I thought, what's the best way for helping a historian communicate with AI? It's got to be an AI. So I went to AI itself to help me communicate with AI, and that then, I can only use this phrase, birthed this very intriguing experience, which we are going to cover the details of. Some of the images are truly gorgeous, and I have to say, some of them look so good that frankly I think the movie stars would actually prefer to be on them. I think they would have set the movie on fire. Others, maybe a teensy little bit, stereotypical. More than was intended. For example, the concept of pagodas and Japanese history has been remembered, but the concept of a pagoda mast is not understood. So I was asking for one thing, it interprets it as something very different. It does look very Japanese, that's coming up, but there is one going, I didn't really, alright, I'm gonna take that because it does look good and it looks really Japanese and really cool, but there's also, it doesn't look quite like what I wanted. And then, you have some which frankly you have to worry about. You do worry about what was produced. You worry about what actually the machine came to. And what the machine truly thinks of humanity and the cultures. And there were some discussions it had of various nations' navies, which just smacked of propaganda. They really did. I am sort of convinced that ChatGPT might be a wereaboo. I am honestly going to put this out there, and those who don't know that, that is a slang term for someone who is so believing in the might and capabilities of the German equipment that they do not acknowledge any faults or any issues with it at all. In their mind, everything the Germans had was perfect, 100% in every single way. Those are a very, very small group of people in the world, but honestly, ChatGPT was worrying about it at one point. Was worrying about it with its phraseologies. Anyway, the book, which got me to £174. Very nice, thank you very much. There were some people when I mentioned this book, this fact, and discussing this live, went, but I thought you did quite well as an academic. Believe it or not, that is doing well as an academic. The days that used to be up until about the 1970s, 80s, where if an academic had published 2 books, they were financially secure enough, they could get married, settle down, get a mortgage, and would be expecting their career progression to be quite standard and going on, and they'd be going on to good things. Long past. This is my first book. It's had 2 editions out. That's lovely. And mainly the other books are being held up by the cost of purchasing pictures for them and picture rights. I have still not paid back the money it cost me to buy pictures for this book. For the rights to use pictures. Not paid it back. It was done on a credit card because it's the only way I could do it at the time. Believe it or not, they don't give you career development loans, etc. for funding the purchasing of pictures for your book, but you can't get the book published if you don't have pictures. It's the fun of life. But it's a good book and I like it, and there's a competition to win a couple of copies down below, or rather a couple of copies up for to be won in a competition. And yeah, thank you for the people who are buying it, because again, books are the important thing for academic. So here is what I started with. Here are where my ideas came in and what I was thinking, because, and I'll discuss this with each ship as I get into it and I'll explain more of this thinking, but I basically started off with trying to think about what were they really like the navies. I started from the navies and then looked at the Star Destroyers. And the first thing I did, and realized quite quickly when I was actually started having these discussions with various AI systems to actually generate these pictures, is that I had a better understanding of the different types of Star Destroyers than they did. which confused me because I would not claim to be the biggest Star Wars geek. I am a naval historian. I am naturally inclined to go and research the ships, and I have spent more time on various things like Wikipedia, etc., and with certain books which are entire sort of Star Wars encyclopedias of technology and equipment, going through the ship designations than I necessarily would like to think about, because, and I actually have a fair number of books on various other ones as well, which I've done book reviews of, because of trying to make things as relatable as well to various audiences, and because I do find it interesting to compare ship construction, and sometimes it's useful to take a science fiction or a fictional vessel and apply the same techniques of analysis. This is what it's called, but these are its capabilities. Does what it's called match its capabilities? So if you are preparing something, this is important to know what a ship's called or what a ship's capabilities are. Because does what it's called tell you how they expect it to be used versus what its capabilities are, and work it through like that. That is something I do with science fiction ships. That's something I do with real ships. It's something I try and teach my students. It's the base point of when you're getting into what we sometimes call forensic engineering from a historical perspective, in that we often analyze plans and ships to try and plans of ships to actually work out what do they really. This is what they're saying publicly. This is what they are writing down and giving to politicians. This is what they're saying internally. Okay, let's look at what the real balance of things is, and let's look at what they prioritize, what gets emphasis, what gets money spent on it in the actual construction, in the actual design, what gets given space, what gets given organizational space as well, where it's organized, where it is within the hull, because something could be given a large space, but it's really back-afthed in one of the sections where frankly no one really goes around, or is it somewhere in the center of the ship where you can get to quickly? Those sort of things can tell you a lot about what a ship is really supposed to do. So that's a first point of forensic engineering, really, from a naval historical perspective. Mostly from an engineer's perspective, you start looking at the designs and the metallurgy and the spacings, etc. But from a historian's perspective, forensic engineering is slightly different. And you can do that with science fiction ships. So that was a shock to find out that for all that, I knew more about it than systems which I presumed were programmed by definitely geeks like myself, but I'm a naval history geek. They are IT geeks. They are usually, and this might be me making stereotypes again, but in my experience, most IT geeks really love technology, and they really love science fiction because that's about the future of technology. So usually they have a far better knowledge of that than me. And I was kind of shocked to find this was the way it was programmed. So I took my lovely worked out ideas and said, right, and I'm having a problem with this. I will go and get a friend. I got ChatGPT. And ChatGPT was a good friend. It was helpful. Now, many people have commented, oh, you should have made them bullet points. Some of the systems didn't like bullet points. When I programmed in bullet points, they went weird. Some did. So some I did have to say I played around with bullet points. Most of the ones which preferred bullet points over written sentences and written structures were actually the ones which produced not quite as good imagery in my experience. It was interesting to work with them, but I tried to use these in everyone because I was trying to keep it honest, because I said I'd start out with my definitions. When my definitions didn't work, I took my definitions to ChatGPT for the AI advice on how to communicate with AI. Yes, the AI was my Cyrano de Bergerac for the purposes of getting AI to do what I wanted it to. It worked. I think. It was certainly an experience. Now, in a live, I expanded both these greatly, but as I'm going to talk it through, and hopefully, unlike in the live, I'm not going to keep dealing with people asking questions, which is the fun part of live, but I do realise some people find it distracting, because they're going, oh, you're not keeping on the flow of the conversation, but I'm also trying to keep pace with the chat. I'm not doing that again. I'm going to discuss both my version and the ChatGPT version whenever we get to a ship. But first of all, what I'm going to do is every time we click through, I'm going to go first click through in full screen, so you get the full impact of the images that were produced. And before we do go much further, and this is something which is probably very easy for those who watch live, but not for those who are watching this for the first time, I want you to guess which picture this came from, which phraseology generated this picture, and which one I used it for. And I'm going to give you a few seconds now, before I start clicking through, to figure it out. So you can read all the chat GPTs. Which one was this created by, and which one did I decide to use it for? Just think about that now. Right then. Here is the Royal Navy. Here is the images generated for a modernized Warspites. And yes, I will say this. I really do love the one on the left. I really do. Now, what I wrote was take a late model Venator class, i.e. Venator 2, with no central doors, but those big side doors and forward doors for fighters to enter and exit, and add an extra set of main battery guns down the centre line of the ship, where on the early Venators there were large doors. It's got to look like it's got a modernised veneer over a solid workhorse of the battle line. This, as you can see, ChatGPT changed into the wonderful phraseology. This Star Destroyer takes inspiration from the formidable design of the Warspite battleship. It boasts a modernized appearance, with sleek lines and solid battle-tested demeanor. The main feature is the incorporation of extra main battery guns down the centerline, reminiscent of the Warspite's formidable armament. The ship maintains the large side doors and forward entrance for fighters, providing efficient deployment and retrieval of starfighters during combat. Now, why did I do this? Why did I go with a modernized vessel? Why was I, pushing that idea? And why do I think this one is far more like it than this one would be? Well, I would say this. I think the whole Royal Navy policy is always to try and get maximum benefit from its ships for as long as possible. That's one of the secrets to the British maintaining such a large fleet. The idea of having ships in ordinary, etc., rather than in commission, is something the Royal Navy is not afraid of and is very happy with and comfortable with, right up until in the Cold War, halfway through the Cold War period, when suddenly politicians get enamored with the idea of just-in-time logistics and having barely enough, and that anything that's just sitting there not being used actively at this minute is a waste. When actually it was quite sensible to keep quite a lot of stuff in storage. It's quite sensible, because you need a lot more in wartime than you do in peacetime, and you can't rapidly build warships. They take years. There is no factory ready to print them out. To be fair, in modern Britain, there's no factory ready to print out tanks, fighters, or anything. So, frankly, the closest thing we do actually have to a factory ready to print it out is actually warships. We actually have some yards which can build them. But and we have the Ajax facilities, and we have the Boxer facilities. They're working, but yeah, it's not great. And all those require quite a sizable. Even the warships require sizable things and components which come from elsewhere in the world, We have a far more solid domestic capability, but yeah. In 1938, though, Britain was very much domestically producing it. Many of the world's largest arms manufacturers were British. I mean, you're talking about the Vickers Armstrong Corporation, they are colossal. And there are a couple of others which are not far off them. Vickers was made by the fusion of Vickers and Armstrong, which were for a while the two largest arms manufacturers and industrial organisations in the world. And they merged together to form one. They were so big when they merged that if you look at the merging today under today's rules, it wouldn't have been allowed to happen, because they dominated at the time too much of the global market share. The countries would have stepped in, told them they had to break up or had to sell something off, or they couldn't do it. Even the British government might have had to step in under its own rules. The thing was, though, in World War II, if you think about it, whilst the King George V's come in, and then US, and then Vanguard comes in after war, and she's sexy and new and all these things. Think about the Royal Navy in World War II, the image. It might be King George V and Rodney which sink the Bismarck, but they're not the famous battleships in World War II. Rodney does her bit, she's fairly prominent. But the famous battleship in World War II is the same battleship which was famous in World War I. The battleship which sets the image for World War II, that is the flagship of Cunningham, of Somerville. It's Warspite. It's Warspite. At the big battles, Matapan, when the British are trying to contend with Operation Sea and Indian Ocean, what's the flagship of the Eastern Fleet? It's Warspite. So this is why Warspite made sense. And under those scenarios, then I was sitting going, well, under that sense, the British, if it was the British Imperial Star Destroyer, it would not be an ISD. It would be a Venator. It would be an older ship, which was being kept going. And again, I did look at the other Star Destroyers the Republic had. The Republic did have some other Star Destroyers, and I'll be talking about them in part. But I went with Venator because the Venator is the Star Destroyer for the Clone Wars. And it had to be a similar level. The others, they come in, they're useful, they're capable, I'll be talking about them, but the Venator is it. And if Warspite was going to belong to any class, it would belong to that class. So it's a modernized Venator. It's a modernized Venator 2, is what I sort of really thought about it. And okay, yes, this really doesn't look much like a Venator. But it does look like a Warspite. And it looks good. It does look good. I have to say, again, the AI maybe not the best in the world in designing these things or reading my instructions, but it has done a good one. Alright, and so we're now expanding again, and we're going to the next Navy's one. And the next Navy's one is an answer to a question. It's the USN. And for the USN, I had written, think North Carolina class. Think ISD, but someone's actually given it some thought. So it's got to have the image of the ISD, but will have to be better designed. I.e., it's going to have more balanced layouts, and also not going to have the bridge so exposed. It's going to be much lower and further forward. And about 2/3 from the bow and 1/3 from the stern. What's interesting, though, that's what I'd written. And the US, this is what ChatGPT comes up with from that. Drawing from the North Carolina class battleships, the Star Destroyer combines the iconic image of the Imperial Star Destroyer with the improved design elements. The layout is more balanced, with the bridge position lower and further forward for better protection. The ship retains the imposing presence of an ISD while addressing previous vulnerabilities, showcasing a blend of power and practicality. Lovely. This is what it produced to that design. This originally came about from Warspite. the designation for warspite. And it was with one of them, and I looked at it and went, that's actually closer to that, which is produced for North Carolina for another one. And I thought, I actually, because to extent this one with its festination of AA defenses and other sort of small arms have been added onto it, looks like a sort of wartime modified variant. And I was going, I like it. It's interesting. It looks like something which has been modernized through the war. So I went with this style, this way, and yeah. The thing again about the U.S. Navy, what are they looking for? What do the U.S. Navy want above all else? They want a good all-round battleship that can cope with the requirements of going across the Pacific, which means it needs to have a significant range, a significant cruising speed, and most of all, a significant speed of advance, because the thing that's been annoying them for 20 years by this point is the standard speed of advance. And the fact that, as I've discussed in other videos as well, the standards were technically part of their reconnaissance fleet for a while. Until they really got their heavy cruisers and carriers going, their reconnaissance fleet was limited to the speed of the standards, because that was the heavy enforcement, because the reconnaissance fleet had been devised when they were building the Lexington-class battle cruisers. And then when they don't come into service, they don't have that fighting core to help them and back to give them the fire support for their reconnaissance. Yes, Lexingtons aren't made to actually fight, but they are meant to provide a reason for the enemy to go, oh, frigate, we don't want to get involved in that, unless we have our own really big fighting thing with us. The Lexingtons are meant to scare cruisers, not fight other capital ships, and that's what they would have done very well. But after years of being held so slow, yeah, that's what the USN wanted. They wanted a fast ship. Now, after these, we go to a very different navy, and we get to a navy where, as said, ChatGPT has some issues. Now, again, we should start off with what I wrote. Slightly smaller guns, looks like a modern build, old star design. Think something like the Imperator-class Star Destroyer, i.e. the forerunner of the ISD, used by the Republic during the Clone Wars. Okay? Here is what ChatGPT created from that. Inspired by the Scharnhorst-class battleships, this Star Destroyer is slightly smaller in size, with smaller guns compared to typical ISDs. It features a modernized build with an old star design, reminiscent of the Imperator class used by the Republic during the Clone Wars. The ship exudes a sturdy, utilitarian appearance, reflective of the efficiency, effectiveness of its Kriegsmarine heritage. I don't seem to remember suggesting anything about efficiency or effectiveness in a Kriegsmarine heritage. Why is the Kriegsmarine being associated with efficiency and effectiveness? Because in the nicest way, they have great capabilities. Yes, they have great stuff on paper, but in reality, most of their designs are, for what they are, far more heavy and far more complicated and far more problematic than they need to be. Mostly because of the scenario of the inefficiency of the Nazi system of governments, which tended to be polycratic in the messiest version of it, with multiple competing centers of power and influence all trying to compete to be closer to the Führer. Yeah, it doesn't work. It's just no. And all sure, they're absolutely right. I have used this definition several times recently, but I'm going to keep using it because it's a good one. Where it's a scenario where you have every person in the kitchen brigade thinks they're the chef, and is sure that what they are doing is the most important part, and they should be calling the tune to everyone else. That is the problem with a lot of German design. They have very good stats on paper, but once you start looking at the way the ship's being built, the efficiency within the design, the layouts, the structuring, the way the systems are setting up to interact, the way they're working together, you find there are lots of problems. Lots and lots of problems. And this is not saying that other navies are perfect on this front, but when you have this scenario, coupled with the loss of institutional memory due to the effects of the Treaty of Versailles, due to the lack of construction, due to the losing of a generation of architects basically going abroad or not being able to work in their areas in Germany, followed by another generation of architects just not existing because there was no jobs for them to grow up into, so there was nobody trained. The sheer quantity of skill which has been lost causes them tremendous issues. And they, for some reason, it decided to make them look like posters. I'm still not quite sure why. Honestly, the Scharnhorst always, for me, are a stepping stone, but they're a very good one for the Germans to create. They have a problem. Their infrastructure industry, and as said, both in a material sense and in a human sense, has been made to a trophy because of the Treaty of Versailles. That was the entire purpose of the Treaty of Versailles as far as Britain was concerned. And so they are trying to rebuild everything. And it starts with the Deutschland class, which are heavy cruisers, please. Don't fall for newspaper talk, they're heavy cruisers. They have 11-inch guns, yes, but everything else is heavy cruiser. And even the 11-inch guns, they only have 6 of them, and their rate of fire and other issues means they are a heavy cruiser. 9 11-inch guns in the Scharnhorst class, well, that's because they've got really good 11-inch guns by this point. But they haven't got the 15-inch guns ready. And they have a choice. They can wait to have a battleship until the 15-inch gun program is ready, and that very nearly delays the Bismarcks. Or they can go with the 11-inch guns, the new 11-inch guns, which are ready. And they're good 11-inch guns. They go with the 11-inch. Yes, it's going to not be as well armed as they want it to be, but it doesn't really matter at that point. What matters is they're going to have a battleship. The Scharnhorsts are about the status of having a battleship, of Germany announcing it's back on the world stage by having a battleship. They matter, they give you status, capability by sheer fact of their existence. Doesn't matter their capabilities. And the fact that they're fast and well armoured, yeah, maybe they're slightly underarmed. But that doesn't matter. They exist and they look gorgeous and capable. Honestly not sure which of these prefers. This one looks a bit to me like a Lego one. It does look a bit sort of like I expected to have Lego bumps. And then we have the Imperial Japanese Navy. Now what I had written for this was, imagine a Zeiston class Star Destroyer from the Battle of Exegol with a pagoda bridge structure. Think Yamato class. What ChatGPT drew from that was, this Star Destroyer is modelled after the legendary Yamato class battleships of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The ship retains the imposing size and firepower of the Zeiston class, with a distinctive pagoda-style bridge structure reminiscent of the traditional Japanese architecture. Despite its massive size, the ship maintains a sense of elegance and cultural identity, reflecting the honour and pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy. Now, I can't disagree with any of that. I can say that, frankly, I think that the smaller ones in the picture on the left are very interesting. The one on the right is very cool to me, and it does look sort of, it's kind of an interesting style. I would say the colouring is also good. It was something I was completely not forgetting, but it's not the same grey. It's a different tonality. And it does look somehow more like a Japanese Navy symbology. You also have the different sort of styling and shaping of the mast on this one versus this one, and versus those at the back. Now, what was I thinking about? Why did I go with the Zeiston class? Well, the Zeiston class are, of course, the ones from the Battle of Exegol, which have the big guns. And you can sort of see maybe these had some sort of guns underneath them. I'm not sure. The design doesn't really show. Again, it's the problem with all the AIs is that they seem to have not been programmed with knowledge of the various systems and the various capabilities, which is a shame. It really is. It's a really big shame, because you want to have that variance. And I was going for that because, rather like the recovering Emperor on Exegol, the Japanese Navy wants the maximum firepower because they want to not just beat, they want to awe their opponents. They cannot beat their opponents on infrastructure, on industrial output. The Emperor can't with Exegol. He can't. The idea that one planet is going to be able to outproduce the rest of the entire universe is obscenely stupid. It just couldn't happen. So the entire fleet, yes, he's got a few thousand of these ships, but compared to what the Imperial Navy had at its height, that's a drop in the ocean. It doesn't really matter. And compared to what, theoretically, the Republic, even the New Republic with all its issues, could have actually put together if it had mobilized its infrastructure industry, it's nothing. So what he needed to do was to hit hard and fast with things which looked overwhelmingly powerful and scary, to paralyze the enemy on a psychological level through fear. The Japanese were looking for a ship which was going to be so powerful, so big, so well armed, and so well armored that the Americans, even though they could just build more ships and beat it, were supposed to be cowed. Go, oh good God, we'll lose so many ships. Oh, we lost so many ships. Remember, there's a whole debate about them. The Japanese tended to produce their big ships. That was part of their deterrence strategy. And they'd had an ongoing various deterrence fleet strategies. And this is something I'm going to get into a video soon when I talk about the work of Saito Tetsutaro. And that's important. But also, of course, the Japanese have their whole attrition doctrine. And then once they've attrited the enemy fleet, they then want to do a decisive battle. They have a whole strategic battle plan for how to win a war. And theoretically, the power of these ships was to also shift that in their favour. You see, one of the problems with the attrition doctrine, to try and make the US Navy down to a size at which it was manageable for the IJN, was it would be very easy to attrit them so much the USN withdrew, used their infrastructure, built up again, and came back again. And the trouble is that would happen far too quickly for the Japanese to be able to recover and rebuild anything they'd lost in comparison. So what they really didn't want was the Americans to get halfway in and then withdraw. The Yamatos, with their ability to theoretically engage two standards at once, one gun, the aft gun keeping a standard battleship busy while the two forward turrets managed to engage and destroy another, etc., and allow them to cycle through, would allow them to be able to reach that decisive point at which they could engage decisive battle, the Kantai-Kessen as it's often called, much earlier, before the Americans realised what was happening to them. So they'd have to attrit the forces far less for them to be able to feel viable they can then get to the engagement. The reality is I still don't think it would work, but that was the idea. And so that's where the Zeiston class really do sort of fit with that idea. Anyway, what's up next? Well, up next, I'm going to tell you now. You have to be very careful looking what comes next. It is gorgeous. It is beautiful. It is going to rend your heart in two when I finally take it off the screen. Prepare to be silent and dumbfounded for at least a few seconds, because I'm going to show you something which honestly proves that AI might have an artistic soul. Or it's possible it does, because this is beautiful. Yes. Just drink that in. Just take it into your soul. Where my idea had been was, it's got to be beautiful, sleek lines, Ferrari red tints, look like the Star Destroyer equivalent of an Armani suit. Think Littorio class. This is what ChatGPT said. Taking cues from the sleek and stylish Littorio class battleships, this Star Destroyer is a masterpiece of design and engineering. It features beautiful Ferrari red tints and sleek lines that evoke the elegance of the Armani suit. The ship exudes sophistication and power, showcasing the pinnacle of Reggio Marina craftsmanship and Italian naval prowess. Oh my. Now, what I will say is these are builders' models. And as we all know, supercars often look best in the showroom before you actually drive them and something breaks. So, this perhaps is the best space to examine them. But this one comes with a Ferrari cannon. I mean, it's bad enough shooting your enemy with lasers and other weapons, which, by the way, I presume which slot away with this one and come out because they would ruin its looks otherwise. But you're shooting Ferraris at them? I'm not sure if to be insulting or getting out a big glove to catch and go, here, bada bada. I don't know how to do this. It's gorgeous. It is gorgeous. And it is the thing is actually, they actually did get the Italian design philosophy, which was to look beautiful. It was part of the reason the Italian Navy were able to project themselves so well, was the image their ships sent when they arrived in port. They did look good, they did look gorgeous. They didn't have the red tints like this, but oh my lord. This thing looks gorgeous. And it'll be a sort of scenario of going, yes, that's the bad guy's ship. In any movie, you know it'd be the bad guy's ship, but you wouldn't want to damage it. It just looks too good to hurt. You just want to take it home and put it on display case and just sit in a comfy chair drinking some iron brew while staring at it and going, oh my, you're beautiful. You really are. It's gorgeous. It truly, truly is. Which made the next one, I have to admit, a bit of a disappointment. I will say the next one's a bit of a disappointment. And I'm going to leave this full screen for a few more seconds for you to once again enjoy the delectation. If you pause at this point in the video, I will completely understand. I would hope you will complete the whole video, but if you pause now and this just becomes your screen forevermore, I understand. I know where it's coming from. I feel the desire too. Oh, that's gorgeous. Pull yourself together, man. Oh, it's good. So good. Oh, that hurt to go away from it. It really did. And I'm only partially acting that, I have to admit. Only partially acting, because These are the Dunkirk class ones, and I don't want them full screen. I really don't. The Dunkirks, they were fun. And for some reason, no matter what I did, they came in poster form. So, to add emphasis to that, I'm actually going to make some more appear. If I've lined it up right, yeah, that was close. That's better. Now, I had programmed in, again, think about the Imperator class, but it should be all forward main armament, all aft secondary. That's what we're looking for with the Dunkirks. Inspired battle ISDs. It's just, that's what we're looking for. What ChatGPT came from with this was inspired by the Dunkirk class battleships. This Star Destroyer boasts an innovative design with all forward main armament and all aft secondary guns. The ship combines the firepower of an Imperial class Star Destroyer with the strategic flexibility of the Dunkirk class, offering a formidable presence on the battlefield. Again, they're not just wereboos. Okay, they're weeboos. Strategic flexibility? Formidable presence on the battlefield? Okay, I have to admit, there is actually, to an extent, deserved with the Dunkirks. I will actually go so much as pretty much deserved on it. There are certain operations in World War II where the Royal Navy would have loved to have had a Dunkirk alongside them. Absolutely loved it. But sadly, that wasn't to be. I would say, though, I don't think it's done that great a job of positioning them. Mostly because it's trying to emphasize more on the ISD's traditional look and less thinking about the Dunkirk phraseology. That was a bit sad for me. And I did do this many, many times in various different systems, and they all produced a similar thing where they couldn't really seem to get the idea of the all-forward main armament aft secondaries. And that was a disappointment to me. I have to admit, that was a disappointment. The French did that because, again, of their own infrastructure limitations, their own issues in terms of the treaty size limitations, and the problems they were facing. They had reasons for it. But it's one of those scenarios where the French were trying. They were trying very hard. They're trying very hard to push forward. And they didn't manage to. But what they still produced was very good. It just wasn't the full good of what they could have produced if they'd had a little bit more consistency of support for their navy. Again, that's understandable to an extent because the reality of the French situation post-World War I was they were broken. In so many ways, they were broken. The battles around Verdun had... Some people use the phrase destroyed an entire generation, and I don't think that's quite right. Because destroyed always suggests sort of a finite thing, an infinite thing of where they have been taken out and they've gone. No, it's far worse. It's not just the number of people who are actually killed in the war. It's a number of people who live after the war, who are dealing with the physical, the psychological scarring, the loss, the trauma of the war. In many ways, it had ripped the soul out of a generation. It's taken away their hope, their heart. That's the reality of World War I for the French in many ways, and that's one of the reasons why they find themselves in the situation they are in World War II. It very much sets the scene for it. And that's one of the reasons why their governments are so transitional and vacuous and constantly changing and constantly because they're trying to grapple with the magnitude of what has happened to them as a nation. They're trying to grapple with what has happened to them in the magnitude of it as a people. It's just too much. Too much, really. And that's what results. But We didn't stop with the French, and now I have to repair you, because what comes next was not intentionally so, but it came out as this. It came out as this. So be prepared. For now, we have the Soviet ISD. Drink it in. Yes, it has smoke belching from it in various points, but to be honest, I wrote the description based on the Ganguts, which at this time were pretty old, and when they did work had some very interesting steam vents. And that's why I'd written, think Resurgent class, but closer to Imperator size, with lots of red paint with golden hammer and sickle, and probably smoke seeming to leak from random vents. And I was quite sure how it operates, but it does. ChatGPT, as you can see, has turned this into a very different eloquent prose. This Star Destroyer draws inspiration from the Resurgent class, with a Soviet twist. Closer in size to the Imperator class, it features vibrant red paint adorned with golden hammer and sickle motifs. Mysterious smoke seems to leak from random vents, adding to its enigmatic aura. And despite its unconventional appearance, the ship operates with surprising efficiency, embodying the resilience and resourcefulness of the Soviet Navy. Okay, I didn't want to say this, but that's a bit too cruel. You know, the Soviet Navy, yes, they had to be resilient and resourceful, but it was mostly because they didn't get any resources, and mostly they had to be resilient because they were expected to make do with nothing. But, yeah, okay. Alright. It's a bit cruel, but we'll take it, we'll take it, we'll take it. We will take it. But realistically, yeah. Again, it's a bit closer to the ISD than what I was aiming for. I was aiming for, as I said, a Resurgent class. But it works. It really does work. And there were other designs, as I showed in live. One of the things I do is in the lives I tend to show off all the sort of the working that gets me to points when I do videos like this. And in the live I did show off some of the other options which came through. The Soviet Navy in 1938 was in an interesting place. They had a lot of potential. They had a leader who was suddenly very interested in getting a battleship because, well, let's be honest, Stalin's a dictator, and in 1938 every dictator worth their salt had battleships. Even Franco had a battleship. Not a particularly good or big battleship, but, you know, he had a battleship, and while Stalin had the Ganguts, they didn't really feel like his, you know? They were inherited battleships. They weren't really the Man of Steel's battleships. They were these things he had left over from the Imperial era, which were just there. They weren't really wanted. He wanted a proper battleship. It's basically what dictators do, you know? People who are sort of mini dictators like to have cars with long noses. Not sure why that one is. Well, battleships are dictators' versions of that. They like to have big long ships which are shiny and grey and massive and girthy, that have lots of big, long guns on them. Nice long guns projecting out. That is really what a dictator wants. Truly it is. And yeah. Here was another of the ones suggested for Warspite, I think it was. Yeah, it was for Warspite. That looks almost a little too scary, honestly. I have to say, I get set these topics sometimes by my patrons, and the process is the patrons suggest the topics, and then the topics get voted on. In fact, currently there's probably a vote live now when this video comes out, because I will have started a vote, well, today when I'm recording on the Sunday the 24th, but the vote will end on the 31st. So it's going to go through this full week. And it's interesting what comes up sometimes with suggestions. When I first saw it, I was thinking, okay, well, I do a lot of science fiction infused stuff because I like science fiction, so that makes sense. But then when I was looking through it, I think this is actually quite a good historical analysis here, because what it forces you to do when you're doing this thing is to really bake down what are the realities of those navies in 1938, and try and transpose it into a system which we know something about, but which is a completely different system. How would those navies have reacted if they were dropped into that scenario? Still, I will say this, my favourite of the entire set to look at is this one. But my favourite in terms of what I think really gets the idea of her is this. Don't ask me why. I couldn't really put it into words, but that ship looks like it's a warspite to me. It just looks like it looks both elegant, beautiful, and there to really muck you up if it wants to. It just does. It's a absolutely gorgeous looking design. I have it on the big screen, full screen over there, and this side's where I'm recording. And it just... it's gorgeous. It truly is. But I am, as those who watched live will know, a nice soul, and I do have a little bit more than just these. I tried to figure out what would a swordfish variant X-Wing look like. That was frankly confusing, and confusing for me, and it turned out the various options. I went through about half a dozen different AI program systems, and it was interesting. Still can't figure out why one of them, one wing has a 5-pointed star and one has a 6-pointed star, but we'll leave that to one side. And don't get me started on the symbology going on this particular variant. I did think though that an X-Wing sort of fitted with a swordfish. Yeah, I could have gone Y-Wing, but the trouble is the Y-Wing and and some of the other types, when you stick them with swordfish, the poor AI, it knew what an X-Wing was. It knew what an ISD was. It doesn't know what all the other aircraft are, and it got progressively weirder. And I can give you an absolute proof of that, because this is what it came up for the Blackburn and the ARC-170. This is sort of getting into the right idea. I'm not sure what's happened with this. I really don't know what happened with this. Sort of the right idea. I'm worried, and I don't know why all the pictures that came from this particular site always have this sort of giant space jellyfish in the background, sort of thing. Looks like a nebula with form. I'm not quite sure. But anyway. It was, as always, a lot of fun to do. Thank you to all the subscribers who did it and suggested it and voted for it. And as always, I do finish with a question. So, the question I'm going to finish on this video with, and I want you to really think about this one. We've talked about the 1938 navies taking over Star Wars. There is another universe which is actually more complete if you think about it. You could, go through it. And the question is this. Which faction, which group in Star Trek looks most like the Navy, each Navy from 1938? Which Navy can you see they are inspiring that Navy's ships, so there is something that is coming. There are some which are, I would agree, are completely outside of the realms of really thinking it through. But have a look at the ship designs. I'm not talking about the species, I'm not talking about their command structures, I'm talking about their ship designs and how they use and what they do with their ships. Which navies do you think each one comes from? Which navies do you think each one has a similarity to? And maybe eventually that'll be suggested as a Patreon topic for me to work through, but I hope it will be not for a while, because honestly, either I need to get better at programming ChatGPT to communicate for me with AI, or I need to get better at programming the AI pictures, or the AI picture systems need to get a far larger database of science fiction for stuff. I'm sorry. I'm going to end with this. AI, cool. It can be interesting and a very helpful tool, but AI is programmed by geeks. I know this because I am a geek, but I'm not an IT geek, I'm a history geek. That's fine. But IT geeks, the one thing you've always been is good. All of you have always been, in my experience, is good on science fiction and good on sci-fi. Why is it that the child of your brains, your AI, has such bad databases when it comes to it? Please tell me that one. I know it's very, very stereotypical of me to suggest, stereotyping of me to suggest this, but yeah, come on. Who was holding you back from programming in all the important information? It has world leaders in it. It doesn't have the different types of fighter from Star Wars. I know, one of those has copyright, the other one doesn't, but so what we've got coming up next week? Well, it'll be the first carriers, conversions, and scratch builds. And that's going to be fun. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you're enjoying the year of the aircraft carrier, and thank you for supporting the channel. If you like the video, please like. Consider sharing if you want others to enjoy it, and maybe subscribe. I would really like you to subscribe. I've got a family little competition going, which has to be, hopefully have to get 15,000 subscribers by Christmas this year, and then finally, the bet between my mother and aunt over it is over. We'll leave that to one side. There's also, if you'd like to support mainly my book habit, but the channel as well and its growth, well, yeah, the channel is basically my book habit, let's be honest. There is Patreon, and there is also membership in the channel, and there's Ko-fi. Thank you very much for everyone who does all those things. It's so kind of you. Thank you very much, and take care.